Welcome to another episode of the Rain Race Podcast. I'm your host, GT Rain. We'll start things off very quickly tonight by apologizing. Oh, my co-host in 4 frames per second. We'll introduce in a second here. Want to apologize for not having an episode last week to recap the 6 hours of Fuji as we had expected to. You might be able to tell by the slightly shocking quality of my voice tonight that after 4.5 years of hiding in every single corner of the world, I managed to pick up that virus that shut down the entire world in 2020, which did not do me any favors and certainly wasn't in a ready state to do a show last Thursday evening. So a week later, half recovered. We're a little bit better. But regardless, we're going to try to keep this episode a little bit brief because we don't have the 6 hours of Fuji to recap anymore. Going to keep it pretty much to an Indianapolis IMSA recap. Got one little news piece from a couple of weeks ago at this point that we're going to cover at the end of the episode. and we'll take your questions and we'll call it a day, which I think really works out because the last 2 episodes have been like the 2 longest episodes we've ever had. I already briefly touched on it. My co-host, Stu, hopefully you're feeling a little bit better, although guess we wouldn't know. You're over there in 4 frames per second tonight.
Yeah. Apparently you passed on the illness too. I don't even know what it is. It's not the camera. There's something going on here behind the scenes that have not been able to get to the bottom of. But you know what? You just got to roll with the punches, just like many of the teams did at Indy with the the punches. In that case was some severe weather that rolled through. So
one would say it was a rain race.
Oh, there we go. Tie it all back together. Clever.
Yeah, it was the first 6-hour enduro we had at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. This second year of that track back on the IMSA WeatherTech SportsCar Championship calendar for the first time since 2014. 6-hour enduro, like the other 6-hour enduro we had at Watkins Glen that you are well aware of. It was a pretty wet and wild race at Indianapolis and one that challenged the drivers quite a bit. Saw quite a bit of full course yellow running, but we also saw some surprise, for me at least, winners come victorious after those 6 hours, and we're going to talk about all of that in the coming time here. So, you want to kick things off?
Sure. So, we can. There's not too much that I have to touch on in qualifying. I think, what we saw throughout the Open. It's an Endurance Cup weekend. So what we're seeing go on in the practice sessions leading up to the qualifying sessions and even in the qualifying sessions isn't necessarily all that indicative of what we're going to see out on the track on Sunday morning. And it really wasn't indicative of what we ended up seeing. We can touch on it super quick here. We did see the 01 Cadillac come through with some really strong pace here. In qualifying, they snagged the pole position by over 2/10 on the number 40 Acura, and it really looked like the 01. Actually, the entire weekend really looked like it had some good strong pace. It looked like this is a team that needed to show up and have pretty much a flawless weekend, and it looked like they certainly had the speed to, if they were able to pull off a flawless weekend, to fully capitalize on it. So a good start from them. We also saw in LMP2 everything was fairly close amongst for the championship competitors. Maybe not so much in qualifying, but we will touch on more of what the race looked like there. But GTD Pro, I think, was the big talking point coming out of qualifying. Of course, we know it's a razor thin championship fight there with the number 77 AO Racing and the number 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. And when it was all said and done, Rexy did end up qualifying on pole, but unfortunately would not be able to keep that pole position as a result of a ride height infraction. They got demoted to the back of the class and would have to start not only at the back of the GTD Pro field, but behind all of their GTD competitors as well. So really a costly penalty for Rexy and AO Racing, who had really good pace. But with it being a 6-hour race, it's not the end of the world. Of note, after Rexy's time was removed, the other 12 cars were within 3/4 of a second to pole. So, classic GTP or GTD Pro doing GTD Pro things, some incredible drivers, and extremely close competition playing out there. And that would ultimately transition over into the race. I don't know if you had an opportunity to see too much of qualifying, or had any big takeaways that you noticed from either qualifying or I guess just in the lead up to the race in general.
I had plenty of time to watch qualifying. Matter of fact, I had plenty of time to watch any session they could have streamed that weekend. Just being really stuck in my bedroom, but I did get to watch qualifying. I did miss the start of the GT qualifying because I had the time wrong. But I will say a couple notes on qualifying here. Number one, you already mentioned the AO Racing Porsche getting sent to the back. I was going to make a quick joke that the back at Indianapolis is maybe the place where you actually want to be at the start, although didn't really have a big pile up in turn one this year like I think some people might have predicted we could have had, especially with those slick conditions at the beginning of the race. And then you already touched on it, that pole position for the 01 Cadillac. Definitely what they needed to do in the championship battle, pick up those 35 points that they get for getting pole position and maximizing that championship position going into the race. And it's a race where we're going to talk about it in a little bit here, but they looked very, very strong. I think the strongest they've looked, I would say probably the strongest they've looked this season, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
When you look at the entire grand scheme of things, I think they had probably the best ultimate pace overall. The track conditions varied quite a bit, and there were different parts of the race where cars or different cars had more pace than the others. But overall, I think they were a strong contender, and unfortunately, the race didn't end up going quite their way, which we'll touch on in a little bit here. But from a qualifying perspective, definitely did what they had to do there.
Yeah, it was good to see them doing well because, we were coming into this race and we were looking at the championship standings, and while they certainly weren't mathematically eliminated, or it was going to be a stretch for them to claw their way back into the championship. It was going to take two virtually perfect weekends from them at Indy, and then following that up at Petit Le Mans. So at this point, it was definitely still very much alive, as you mentioned, even throughout the race. I think probably probably one of the quicker, if not the quickest, cars in dry conditions, and then weren't too bad in the rain. Which, speaking of the rain, you alluded to it just a second ago. We did not have chaos in the opening corner at Indy this year like we did with the 01 Cadillac in last year's race. But we did have a different kind of chaos in the opening stints of this race, and that was with rain. It started off kind of more so just damp conditions, and then as the running went along, the skies kind of opened up a little bit more, and the rain got pretty heavy to the point where we had, there were some full course yellows for incidents that took place, but we ultimately did have a full course yellow and an extended full course yellow as a result of the rain that was falling down and standing water that was accumulating on the track. There were some areas of the track that, of course, wasn't there to witness it in person, but you could see the cars going through it, and it was pretty deep water. And especially at a high speed track like Indy, aquaplaning, and it's not going to end well. And while we do have rain tires, there's a fine line to cross between throwing them out there on the rain tires and saying have at it, and then also balancing, of course, the safety of the drivers, the track workers, the teams, etc. So we did have an extended full course yellow for the weather. Now, I guess I've probably said my piece a little bit there on what I thought of the full course yellow coming out, and we've talked about this a fair bit with the rain at Le Mans, and Le Mans being probably the prime example.
Yeah.
Do you think that we needed that long of a full course yellow, or did you think maybe the conditions were fine that we could carry on? What were your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, I think it followed the trend of what we have been seeing this entire year. So I can't say I was surprised that we were under yellow for that long. And actually, to be honest with you, the really long full course yellow that we had just for rain didn't bother me a whole lot, mostly because I just have come to expect it at this point. As you mentioned, I sort of spoke my piece with that after the 24 hours of Le Mans this year, and I'm glad we're talking about it. It was like a 45-minute full course yellow instead of a 4 whatever hour when it was at Le Mans this year. And we also saw a similar thing at Watkins Glen for the 6 hours this year. So that was about what I expected. I think the bigger question really comes with the single car incidents that came as a result of the rain. That's where you have a stronger argument for the full course yellow debate, if you want to have that. And can you cover that under virtual safety car conditions? I do think this is another race, far from the first race this season, where we've been discussing this as a talking point leaving the race. And I think that's something that IMSA is going to have to weigh going into the off season, because people have become more and more vocal about it. I've started to see more people talk about this, especially with the frequency of yellows and then going back to green and then having one car go off track and then having another yellow a few minutes later. But then also just the procedures themselves for the full course yellow procedure seem to make what should be a very quick recovery and then get back to racing turn into a 20-25 minute ordeal with sending multiple classes of cars down the pit lane. There's definitely room for improvement there. I've said it before. I will continue to say it. If we continue to have the full course yellow situations that we have right now. Yeah. I do want to jump back really quick, though, and talk just about the first couple laps of the race here, because I think one of the drives of the season, in the GTP category especially, from Felipe Nasr in the number 7 Porsche, went from P7 up to the lead after 2 laps in the rain, and just probably one of the standout drives I've seen this year, in terms of just a single stint that I can look back at the end of the season and say, wow, that was really a defining moment for that team. When you're the championship leader, I think what Nasr did there at the opening of that race was extremely impressive, and clearly not putting caution to the side and just trying to exercise as much as he could after what might have been a disappointing qualifying result from them.
Yeah, you're right. It's, there's a lot to be said for, I don't want to say it's easy to be quick in the dry, but it's these drivers and teams, they run so much dry weather running that sometimes we can forget like what challenges present itself in the rain and what drivers really do rise to that occasion. And it was very clear in this situation, in those first few laps, that Nasr really rose to the occasion, and they didn't have a great starting spot, like you said. Starting 7th is, you're in the thick of it. If you started 7th last year, you were going to be right in the middle of that, all of the chaos that happened in the first corner. So the fact that, it was able to keep it on track, and not just keep it on track, but get up to speed very quickly. We also know that the struggles that these cars have getting heat into the tires as well, that's amplified even more with those wet conditions and cold rain tires to start the race. So it was a great drive from Felipe Nasr to start this race.
Yeah, absolutely. You were talking about the full course yellow and the lengthy full course yellow we had. We did get to some periods of extended green flag racing after those full course yellow procedures, and I think the main talking point that came out of that, or came after that rather, was one of Romain Grosjean in the 63 Iron Lynx Lamborghini SC63, putting a very impressive performance down in damp conditions and bringing that car up to the front of the field for the first time this entire season at IMSA. I say entire season, of course, it's only run the endurance races minus Daytona. But still,
that's a lot of hours. Yeah, that's a lot of hours of running still. So, yeah, it was impressive to see Grosjean, drive the SC63 up, sort of through the GTP field, and had to pass some good cars to get up there too. I mean, we mentioned the 0-1 being really strong all weekend. There were still no slouches in the rain. They had to pass, who was leading at the time? I think it was the number 6 Porsche that was that they had to pass for that he had to pass for the lead.
There was some contact.
Yes,
between
there was.
Him and the number 6 Porsche. I forget who was driving the 6 at the time. May have been Tandy. I can't remember.
Yeah, it was. There was contact regardless, though. But I feel like the contact kind of overshadows a little bit the drive that Grosjean had to get there, because there was at one point, he was like 5 seconds behind. I think the 0-1 may have been running second, and when Grosjean was third, and it was like 5 seconds behind them, and he's right there passing him 2 laps later, and then it's another 5-ish second gap to the leader, and it was just boom right away. Grosjean just driving up there, looked like he was looked like he had a different compound of tire on out there, or had a different car that he was driving. It was something to see, and it was a very impressive drive. Unfortunately, fortunately there was no penalty for them on the contact with the Porsche. Although you could probably argue that it may have been warranted if one was handed out. But regardless, a great drive by Grosjean. They ultimately ended up getting a penalty on their pit stop. I believe they may have had too many people over the wall.
Yep, exactly.
Perfect. I was hesitating on that one. Too many people over the wall, and then ultimately, shortly after that, their race would come to a premature end as a result of suspension damage that was sustained via some contact. Still pretty wet conditions or damp conditions at least, when they made that contact. So I think overall for Lamborghini and for that entire SC63, everybody that's involved with the car, I think you probably have to be coming out of this weekend, pretty happy with how it all played out. They showed pace all weekend. Is it their ultimate pace? No, but they were competitive, in qualifying. They were within 9/10 of the pole time in GTP, which may sound like a lot, but considering, that these cars that they're racing against has, double or maybe triple the amount of, time under their belt as Iron Lynx has here. Pretty impressive qualifying run, a pretty impressive weekend overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, and not just that, they are going back-to-back in IMSA for the first time this season, with the 10-hour race at Petit Le Mans coming up in just a couple of weeks' time here. So after a promising performance at Indianapolis, I would have to imagine they're going into Petit Le Mans with a little bit more confidence than they had probably going into Indy. Yep.
So after this impressive drive from Grosjean, the race kind of settled into a bit of a groove, and we got to develop some rhythm with it. We did have a few full course yellows that popped up, and one of them we'll touch on in literally just a second. But we started to get into a bit of a groove, and we had some battles start to play out, and cars that may have been strong in the wet kind of moving backwards, cars that were stronger in the dry conditions moving forward, and really some strategy start to play out here. But ultimately, it wasn't too long after all of this. I mean, I guess we probably had maybe an hour and a half or so to go in the race. I don't remember the exact timestamp of it, but one of the biggest moments of not only this race, but probably of the entire IMSA season sort of unfolded in front of us. The 01 Cadillac came in for just a routine pit stop, and a couple of laps, it was either on their out lap or 2 laps after the pit stop, we see the car slowing. It clearly has a tire flat. It was Bourdais that was behind the wheel at the time. He said he had no indication that the tire was going flat, and it was just kind of pretty sudden that it let go on him. And unfortunately, they weren't able to bring that car down pit road right away. There was some damage that was sustained throughout the I believe it was the right rear of the car, and it damaged some of the bodywork. It wasn't terrible. They were still able to continue after changing the tire, but really a huge blow to their championship hopes here. Again, a car that looked so strong all weekend, and ultimately has something that's largely out of their control with a puncture or a flat tire that really I think it put them 3 laps down, and at that point, with about an hour and a half left to go in the race, you're not going to come back from that one. But the car still continued, and what probably made that gut punch even worse for them was what happened, just a few minutes later with the championship leading number 7, as the number 7 came to a stop on the front straightaway after losing quite a bit of time in some of the laps leading up to this. They came to a stop on the front straightaway with power steering issues, and ultimately brought out a full course yellow. But this was kind of a series of events here that was kind of shocking to see unfold. You feel so bad for the 01 seeing a really strong race for them kind of go up in smoke with the flat tire. And then it's, just even more of a hit when seeing the one of the cars that they're chasing, the number 7 Porsche, have issues as well.
Yeah, we already had somebody in the chat, Milton. Thanks for saying the Cadillac curse lives on in Indy.
Yeah.
It's something we've talked about this year. They had that win back at Long Beach, but ever since then, seems like something one way or another has not gone their way. And as you mentioned here, it was something that was, in the grand scheme of things, very minor. If this was something that happened in the first half of the Rolex 24 or in the first few hours of Petit Le Mans, it's something that honestly I think they'd be able to recover from. There's enough time for them to get a wave around and they'd be back on the lead lap, and I think they had the pace at Indianapolis. Maybe, why not? I think they had the pace to win, but I think they definitely were going to be on the podium if it weren't for that.
Yep.
And simply just didn't have enough time to recover from it. And as you mentioned, that additional blow with the number 7 just a couple laps later, that's something that had the 01 not had that puncture, they would have definitely been at least a lot deeper in the championship picture come Petit Le Mans. But ultimately, I think we're going to talk about them a little bit later as somebody who is pretty much statistically as far a shot as they can possibly get. I think they're like 1 point outside of the mathematical probability of being able to be champions in Atlanta. But a real disappointing one for them. And then also the number 7 stopping on the front straight. What was that all about? Because you mentioned this is something that seemed like it was plaguing them for a few laps up to that point. I didn't understand the rationale, and it seems like neither did quite a few other people. It was just coming to a complete stop right after the pit entry. I mean, we're talking, he stopped before the start-finish line. So this is a few hundred meters after the pit entry. I don't really understand it. I don't know why it went unpenalized either. Because bringing out a full course yellow that late into the race, when you could argue, their sister car in the number 6 is battling for the lead.
Yeah,
I don't know. It just was weird.
I'm 100% with you. It was, in the moment when you see that car stopping, you're like, okay, there's obviously some sort of we didn't really know that there was a power steering issue was what was plaguing the car at the time. And usually when we see these sort of, these resets of the car take place, like we saw one with Corvette at VIR on the exit of Oak Tree. They cut hard to the inside line, right on corner exit. The Corvette was not close to the racing line, and it was a relatively safe spot to be able to try and do that reset on the car. If there was nothing else going on and it was a choice to stop the car there and do sort of your system's reset to try and fix it, then I do think that it absolutely should have been penalized. That was not a smart spot to park that car and do that. We saw an LMP2 incident here, like kind of in this same area last year. An LMP2 kind of blocking the track, and when traffic starts to go by, we're very fortunate that there wasn't a huge accident that resulted from that spin, and we're very fortunate there wasn't a huge accident that resulted from this either. We saw the Acura almost clip them. Now, you could maybe argue as well that was the local yellow flag in that area truly being respected all that much? I don't know, but it was definitely questionable as to why choose that spot to stop and do the resets, and then ultimately why there was no penalty that resulted from it. So
and even especially because you have a very long runoff area in turn one where they could have done that same thing. And really, it's not like he's navigating many corners before he gets to turn one. He was already on the straightaway. So
you have the full on the escape road in turn one that you could just go off at the end of it and do your reset and then carry on down the escape road and get back on. It was odd to see. It was odd to see. And then, of course, IMSA kind of had no choice because they didn't really know what was going on either. There's a car kind of parked in the middle of the front stretch. It's not a very wide front stretch. They had really no choice but to throw the full course yellow, and I don't think that's. For an incident that was, again, the car started up seconds later after the full course yellow came out and carried on. But I don't know.
Just one of those weird things.
I wonder as well if IMSA have a mechanism to penalize a team for something like that, like in the moment. Because
just in the rule, are they?
Yeah, because if they don't have any, they can't just go and make up rules as they go along. But apply penalties. But I don't know. That was something that crossed my mind too. Was like, what could they do in that situation to penalize the car?
Well, I'm not well versed in the IMSA regulations, but I'm sure there's some rule in there that they could probably twist a little bit. It's a very uncommon situation, but at the bare minimum, you'd have to say that it was parking the car in an unsafe place on track, or perhaps bringing out a full course yellow. Maybe Porsche or Penske didn't think they were going to bring out a full course yellow by doing that. But as you mentioned, if you're IMSA and there's a car stopped on track in a very high-speed right-hand turn where there's already been a crash earlier in the race and the track is still damp, and
you have crew workers not that far away either. That pit road at Indy is not wide, so
right. So not a whole lot more IMSA could have done, I don't think. I think it was just a quick reaction to something that was equally confusing to them. They didn't seem like they probably had a greater understanding than us of what was really going on with that number 7 car.
Yeah. But with all that being said, the resulting full course yellow that we did get came with around an hour to go. So this meant that we were going to see a lot of sort of the final pit stops take place for this race. At this point, the GT cars can make it to the end with this final pit stop, and the GTP cars I think they could make it. I can't remember exactly how long their stint was at Indy. I think
they were very
made
close.
Yes,
they're very close.
Okay. But what we saw really unfold during this full course yellow was really a race defining and potentially championship defining moment here in GTD Pro as Rexy, who made their way through the field quite slowly and steadily in the first half of the race, just continued to chip away in the second half, and they found themselves in third place during this full course yellow. They come in, they make their pit stop. They have an excellent pit stop, and they come out in first, just squeaking ahead of the 64 Multimatic Mustang and the number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus. So Rexy, the championship points leader, wins the race out of the pits, and is going to be restarting in first, which is that is a big deal. You get the clean air, you don't have any traffic to deal with in front of you, at least initially, and maybe try and put a bit of a buffer. But Rexy also had good pace as well, so this was a huge moment in the race, and that would sort of start to define this final stint of the GTD Pro battle in the race. We had Rexy that jumped out to that little bit of a lead, and were able to largely maintain that throughout the entire final stint. The number 64 the Ford showed moments of maybe being able to reel in and battle Rexy, but ultimately just wasn't quite at that same level. But in my opinion, I think probably maybe the best battle that we saw in this race took place in the battle for third position in the GTD Pro class between the number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, the number 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin, and the number 3 Pratt Miller Corvette, who were battling in there as well. We saw these three kind of duke it out throughout the last, pretty well the last 45 minutes of the race. They were kind of nose to tail. We know that you knew that for the Heart of Racing with the 23, they're chasing Rexy in the championship, and they see them out ahead, and they were trying so hard to get around the 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus, but just. And maybe we're quicker than the Lexus, but just couldn't get the pass done. Couldn't find an opportunity where they had that extra bit of pace to get the move done. And this wound up being a really fun battle to watch in the last 45 minutes. As it turned out, the 3 Corvette would pass both of them and finish in third. But a really fun battle here that we saw towards the end in GTD Pro.
Yeah, as we did at the end of the 6 hours in New York as well, Watkins Glen. I think GTD Pro became one of the main storylines in the final hour of the race after a late yellow. Or not really late yellow, but, later in the race.
And while all this was going on in the GTD Pro class, we also had a nice battle brewing in GTP, although this was not... We did have the number 6 Porsche that was sort of in and around this battle, but they never really, I thought, closed up and truly put pressure on the 2 BMWs, the BMW M Team RLL entries that were running first and second, the 24 leading. Actually, the 25 was leading, I think, at the beginning of the stint, and then the 24 got around them. But the 24 and the 25 running essentially nose to tail for this entire stint. A lot of fun to watch those cars, which have not spent a lot of time towards the front of an IMSA race, and they pretty well were the story of this final stint. They looked really, really strong. They really deserved to be there as well. They did show good pace all weekend, and the 24 and the 25, we wound up seeing a really good battle here in the closing stint between those two.
Yeah, it was a surprising one. I keep claiming it was surprising. You picked the 25 BMW to win the race, so I'll give you kudos for that. It's just another one of those manufacturers / teams, though, that was up at the front, and they seemed like they had genuine pace that we might not have expected going into the race. We talked about Lamborghini Iron Lynx being one of them. They enjoyed some time at the front in GTP. I talked about the mega opening stint by Felipe Nasr in the number 7 Porsche. And BMW at the end, it seemed like nobody was really able to touch them. They were doing, I would say, a risky job at controlling the lead that they had there. I would have expected with the position they were in, you haven't crossed the finish line first in an IMSA race in GTP ever. Their only previous win had come at the result of a post-race infraction. I kind of assumed they were going to use the 25 BMW as a pick, just hold back the number 6 Porsche. We expected Porsche, or at least I did expect Porsche to be very strong going into this race, and I thought they would have a little bit more pace at the end to fight both of the BMWs. With the two BMWs racing each other as close as they were, it looked like they were kind of battling each other for the lead for the last hour of the race. I was hoping it wasn't going to end in tears for them because, again, you have a team that really just needs to get a win here, especially after the rough week Rahal had last week over in Indianapolis. It was a win that they really wanted to get, and I think a win that was well due for that program. So really glad to see that they were able to work it together, work it out, and survive that final hour to win the race and also finish with a 1-2.
And, this is a couple of strong outings for BMW in back-to-back races. They had a strong showing in the World Endurance Championship race at Fuji. Did they got into they got a third place at Fuji? I think.
It was a while ago. It was I'm trying to remember at this point.
Lots happened in the past. Lots happened since that race. We're gonna just finish or end with they had a strong race at Fuji, and then they backed that up with an even stronger race at Indy. Getting their first 1-2 finish with the car. Lots of good things come out for them, and this is really potentially a building block for them. They haven't had much go their way this season, and this could be really a turning point for them if they're able to build off of this going into the off season and come back strong next year and maybe be more of a championship threat when the season gets going next year. So hopefully we're going to see RLL sort of start to take that program to the next level. Maybe they're starting to hit on some things with that car, and we'll be able to see them improve their results. I do see we have Bernardo mentioning in the chat that they got second place at Fuji. So
that's what I thought. I couldn't remember if they were second or not. I knew the third place was the Alpine, and of course the winner was Porsche, but
yes.
I forgot the fact that we had the Inter-Vantor brothers battle. They're not really quite on-track battle, but 1-2 at that race at Fuji.
Yes, it was. Yeah, and we didn't get to talk about that. You're right. After we missed that episode, so we did. At least we can. That's true. It's true. At least we're getting to talk about BMW having some success now. That's what matters, right? So at the end of it all, it was the number 24 of Philippe Ang and Jesse Krohn that took the win there. Of course, ahead of the sister number 25 entry, but finishing in third. Initially, we had the number 6 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963, who had a strong day. Again, we mentioned that we thought that they were going to be the favorites in this one, but they had a little bit of a post-race penalty that's been since handed down. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, handed down today is when it was publicly announced that we got some post-race penalties.
Thursday shows.
Thursday shows. They're just working for us. Got a couple post-race penalties, though, both in the GTP class. Now, let's start this off by saying that after the 6 hours, I was going to say 6 hours of Indy Battle on the bricks, that we had on Sunday. It was a Sunday race, right?
Yes, it was.
They had 7 cars out of the 11 in the GTP class that were impounded due to, well, really no reason. IMSA just used their jurisdiction to impound 7 of the cars after the race, including at least 1 car from each manufacturer. This is something that I think came as a surprise to a lot of people. It was something that was announced pretty early after the race, and immediately when things like that happen, you start to sweat a little bit nervously, because usually, well, I don't know if I want to say usually, but there are often some times where at least one team will get pinged for doing something outside of the rules when you have that many cars inspected after the race. Sure enough, this morning we heard wind, I guess it was actually probably this afternoon, heard wind that the number 6 Porsche, that one that finished third in Indianapolis, and the 40 Wayne Taylor Racing Andretti Acura that finished 5th at Indianapolis, got demoted to P10 for the number 6 Porsche and to P11 for the 40 Acura. Now, this comes as a very big thing, especially for the number 6 Porsche and the championship hunt. Of course, they were trailing that number 7 sister Porsche 963 from Team Penske by only 14 points going into Petit Le Mans. And getting demoted down to P10, that deficit is now at 124 points. I will say, as a neutral, going into Petit Le Mans, and somebody who doesn't really have a favorite for the championship, it is very disappointing that the scenario we had going into Petit Le Mans, which was essentially, depending on how qualifying goes in a couple of weeks, potentially going to be another scenario for like the 4th year in a row where whichever car out of the top 2 in the championship, at least in the top class, finishes ahead in the race, they would win the championship. And we've seen, as I mentioned, I think the past 3 years that at Petit Le Mans, and it's given us some extraordinary final hour moments at that race. With these 2 cars in the same team, perhaps we wouldn't have seen something similar to what we saw last year and how that championship battle ended. But nonetheless, I think we were warming up to a situation where it would be whoever finishes ahead at Petit Le Mans is going to be the champion. And now we're sitting in a situation where the 7 car is a very strong favorite going into the race. And if you're the 6 car, you're going to have to really hope that something happens to the 7 car that really takes them out of it. I'm not even talking like a 01 Cadillac puncture. You're going to need something that probably puts them multiple laps down.
Was it the 7 that had the moment last year early on that got caught up in that incident? Or was it the 6 in last year's race? You need an incident like that. Essentially, it's taking you out of the race.
Right. And so that's just the situation that I brought forward for the number 6 car. The 40 Acura, of course, as well, they also lost some ground in the championship, but we weren't really putting them in the... Well, they were mathematically already out of the championship battle after Indianapolis anyways. So, not really in the same talking point. But nonetheless, another infraction for Acura after an endurance race in IMSA.
Yeah, that's true. It was surprising to hear when it was initially announced post-race, like immediately after the race took place, that IMSA was going to be doing sort of this more detailed tech inspection. It's not like they don't do tech after the race. They definitely do tech inspection. The cars have to go through and pass. But this was a much more detailed tech inspection process, and we're talking about penalties for wiring harness modifications, for brake ducts outside of their homologations. So, we're seeing these may seem like small things. Like we may look at these and think, oh, what advantage are they getting for modifying the wiring harness, or modifying brake ducts? Maybe that one could be, there could be some performance enhancing qualities depending on what's done to them. But the whole point of these cars are that if you're driving the Porsche, everybody's driving the same car. You're driving it to the state that it was homologated in, and that's that's the way it's supposed to be. So while it may have been easy, it may seem like, oh, we could just push this off to the side and just let this slide. It's minor infractions. I think I am happy to see that IMSA just made sure to lay down the law in this case and apply the penalties, because if they don't, then we're just in a massive gray area, and I don't think anybody wants that. We do see that play out in some other championships, and then those are the discussions at that point, that gray area that consumes conversation for months after it happens, or whenever another incident pops up like this. We'd only be talking about that gray area. And with the way that these penalties are handed out, like, it sucks. It's something that's small, sure, but I guarantee you in a couple of weeks nobody's gonna remember that these penalties were handed out and happened. So yeah, it's the way it goes. You always wonder if if they're kind of tipped off about something that's going on, and it kind of leads to some of these surprise inspections, because I think the only other one that we've actually seen this year may have been after the season opening race. There was mention that one more happened earlier this year, but yeah, obviously not ideal for the number 6 Porsche, because that's essentially their championship hopes down the drain. But at the end of the day, the rules are the rules.
Yeah. I sort of wondered the same thing, where you said you are curious if somebody got tipped off about the entire ordeal. But these things are also, as I said, IMSA can do it at any point they want without any reason. So it could have just been a completely routine thing for all we know. Do you want to go over the full championship picture, at least for the top contenders in each class, now that we're going into Petit Le Mans, the final race of the year?
Yeah, we can touch on it a little bit here. In the GTP class, as you mentioned, it is the number 7 Porsche Penske Motorsports 963 that leads the way with 2,650 points. That is 124 points ahead of their number 6 Porsche. The 01 Cadillac is in third. Technically, they still have a mathematical chance, I suppose. But essentially, what they're hoping for is that the number 7 doesn't start the race, make it to the grid. I think there may be a very slight chance, if the 7 does indeed start the race and takes qualifying, that the 01 could still win it. But it's very, very slim. So,
this was. I just want to quickly butt in. That was calculated by Daily Sports Car. I forget exactly who wrote the article. Sorry for that. But I believe there is, as I touched on earlier, mathematically a 1-point buffer for the number 01 car, which really you're talking about the 7 car finishing last, and then the 6 car finishing second or maybe third to last at the most. But that's the situation that the 01's in for winning the championship. And of course, the 01 would have to win the race as well, and also get maximum points in qualifying, whilst also hoping the 7 car and the 6 have a horrible qualifying. So
yeah. Oh, I think I did the math right after the race, and I think so with the number 6 and still, before the penalty, I think it was something like the 7 had to qualify and finish dead last, and the number 6 had to qualify and finish like second last, just in front of them. And while the 01 gets pole and wins, it was like hilariously small chances that it was going to happen. But crazier things have happened. It's sports car racing, so we've seen cars.
Take it to Vegas.
Yeah. Drop $1 on it in Vegas and see if you win a house out of it, basically. So the GTP Championship is it's not looking like it's going to be a great one to watch come the end of the day. But one championship that is maybe it's a little bit closer. It's still not that great, is the LMP2 battle. This was one of the battles that going into the battle on the bricks, I was really looking at as, this is going to be a fun one to watch in the lead up to the end of the season. And the gaps got a lot larger. It was a 4-car battle going into Indy, and really one car kind of emerges as the clear-cut favorite heading into Road Atlanta. That's the 52 Inter-Europol by PR1 Matheson Motorsports entry. They have 1,919 points and a 98-point buffer on the number 74 O'Reilly Motorsports entry. Era Motorsports still on with a mathematical chance. They're 123 points back, though. So if there's an incident or an issue for the 52, then we could definitely see this championship get close. We're probably going to we're hopefully going to see a return to 11 cars on the grid at Petit Le Mans if Sean Creech Motorsport indeed returns. So that always, the more cars in a class, the greater the potential point swing is. But it definitely looks like the 52 is the clear-cut favorite there. In GTD Pro, it is still Rexy that is leading the way. They pad their points lead back to the 23 Heart of Racing Aston Martin. I saw AMR Fan 95 here in the chat tonight. Sadly, the extra Aston in GTD Pro wasn't a help to beat Rexy, and they really needed that to happen in order to stick with them there in the GTD Pro Championship fight. But they're 99 points behind Rexy. We're probably going to see 11 or 12 cars, actually probably 12 cars on the grid for Petit Le Mans. So a 12 car grid is a pretty large one. If Rexy does have any sort of troubles and we see the 23 at the sharp end of the field, then this could be championship game on. So it's not completely over yet. Those are realistically the only two that have a mathematical shot at coming back into it here. And then there is GTD, a fight that we've been trying to wrap up, it seems like, for the last 4 races, as Windward Racing continued to lead there with 3,006 points. They are 222 points ahead of the number 96 Turner Motorsports BMW. So again, Windward Racing, they need to go out, pretty well start the race. As long as they're not finishing like dead last, then they're probably going to be on for a pretty good chance at bringing home that GTD championship. Also notable here, in while we're speaking about GTD, is the Manufacturers Championship was wrapped up in GTD for the for Mercedes. Mercedes wrapped up that championship. So a strong season for Mercedes overall, in IMSA in particular, with Windward Racing, but Corthoff Preston Motorsports, of course, also contributing there with their win at VIR. So a strong year for Mercedes, and they bring home the Manufacturers Championship.
Yeah, and Windward Racing as well, also confirming they'll be back in GTD next year. Yep. Immediately after you and I started speculating if they were going to go up to GTD Pro, so thank you for making us look like fools. But
hey, we've seen cars change classes before. They're on the grid. They could still change.
Yeah, we'll see. But definitely going to be a strong contender again for the championship next year. Already.
I think that's most of what we have to cover from Indy. If I'm not mistaken, any sort of closing thoughts from Indy for you?
Yeah, for me, I think it was a very strong race. I think, given what they had. Okay, you can complain about the full course yellows that lasted a little bit longer. I don't think that's an Indy issue. That's an IMSA thing that, across the board, we're hoping to see some improvements on. But as a track, especially one that's been people have been a little critical of before. You and I think, both included in that, saying, yeah, we'd probably rather see a 6-hour endurance race at a track like Road America, or maybe Laguna Seca, as we used to have in the American Le Mans Series. But I do think what we saw at Indy was a very good product this year, and I think we left this race with more storylines than we had last year. So, conditions aside, hopefully next year, regardless of what weather conditions we have on track, whether it's a completely dry race or another rain out like we saw here, this is a race that remains a staple on the endurance calendar.
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, if I echo a lot of what you said there. This was I know I was definitely doubtful when we announced Indy coming onto the schedule, and what was the quality of racing going to be like. I think we have seen some really good battles in both of the races that have been run here since. Last year in the 2 hour and 40-minute race, we saw that great battle in the closing stint between the two Porsches, and then this year in the closing stint, we got to see that great battle between the BMWs. We got to see an excellent GTD Pro battle. We had some weather thrown in that may have, the weather being thrown in is definitely going to add more excitement to the race, but I don't think that should take away from, just the good overall racing product that we saw out here on track. Are there things that could be, improved? Sure there are. There's always going to be things that could be improved, but I really did enjoy watching this race, and honestly, I'm excited for IMSA to come back next year. It's I think that this could really could turn into all of the Endurance Cup races have their unique feel to them, and I think Indy is kind of carving out that unique feel that it has. So really looking forward to see how this race continues to develop into the future years.
Yeah, and if I'm allowed to make one suggestion,
no,
or thing I would like to see. I think this race personally, I know other people have said the same thing. I'd love to see this race go into the night. I think that would just add a little bit more character as an endurance race. And doing that, you'd be pushing it back to Saturday most likely, which I think is also fine, especially when you're in football-crazed Indiana.
True.
Going up against a home Colts game, I believe, this past weekend. So that certainly probably had a little bit of an effect on the at-the-track attendance for that race. But I personally wouldn't mind seeing it go to a Saturday race running into the night. TV schedules might disagree with that, but I think that would be something I would be interested in seeing going into future seasons.
You mentioned something that was really good there too, and at least got my mind thinking. Some of the images that came out just from this weekend of sort of events that were going on around the track. Before a lot of these races now, IMSA's taking a lot of these cars and putting them on display in the community. And of course, Indianapolis being such a motorsport, hungry area of the world, it was an amazing turnout to go and see the close down a street, and for fans to come out and check out the cars. It looked like there was a lot of community support. I think the locals are going to support any sort of motorsport. But that was really good to see, and maybe can help contribute again to that feel of the event, and really making the Battle of the Bricks that top-notch world-class event that it can develop into.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing, actually, while we're still on the topic. I was talking to David Land a couple days ago, who was at attendance of that race, and it makes sense for the future. Maybe unless you're a team, maybe then it might not make sense, especially this close to the end of the championship. But I would love to see, with the IndyCar season already wrapped up at this point in the season, to see maybe a wild card entry in the GTP class, or maybe just the addition of some full-time IndyCar drivers to the lineups. I would have loved to have seen the IndyCar champion Alex Palou racing for Ganassi and having a three-car lineup, or perhaps they're able to put a second Cadillac on the grid at Indianapolis. Just something to make it a little bit more interesting for the local Indiana crowd that is very IndyCar focused.
Yeah.
I don't know what the likelihood of that would be, given the fact that it's not the premier endurance race for IMSA. Those would go to Sebring and the Rolex 24. So you're probably not going to see an increase of entries, especially in the GTP category. But if you could in any way incorporate some IndyCar drivers into the lineup for future seasons to get that in-person attendance boost, I think that's something that IMSA would definitely benefit from.
kind of like the star car essentially, where
Sure.
you have your stars coming in and racing. That's a really interesting idea, and I wonder if maybe the biggest hurdle to try and get over there is the close proximity to the IndyCar season wrapping up, and the quick turnaround time for the race. That might be a difficult one to get over, but heck, give those. I mean, lots of those guys are racing in, or have raced in this top flight prototype machinery before. So I think that's a very interesting idea. I kind of like that.
Well, I'll throw his name out again because I heard that one Alex Palou would have been interested in doing the race this year if he had known about it ahead of time. And of course, now he just announced that he's doing the 8 hours of Indy for Mercedes. So
True.
clearly some interest in doing additional sports car racing after his mega drive at the 24 Hours of Le Mans this year. And I'd love to see him back in some sports car machinery, although we'll have to see what that might come in the form of next year with Ganassi leaving that Cadillac program.
It's true, babe, but there's always those whispers that they could be sticking around for an LMP2 program, or maybe this is a nice transition to our news story that we want to touch on.
I do want to touch on that, but I also want to go over a couple things, just a couple thoughts from people in the chat that they were discussing about Indianapolis before we move on. Bernardo in the chat saying that was genuinely one of Grosjean's best bit of driving ever, maybe the best bit of driving in his entire career. And I would say, you can make a debate for a career, but for a sports car racing performance, I think that was the standout performance we've seen from Grosjean, and that car and team in general, who've struggled a little bit in prototype racing this year with the ultimate pace of that car, but were a surprise shout in the middle stages of that race when the track was still wet, and had genuinely race-leading pace. And that was unfortunately quickly bookended by the penalty that they had and then subsequent damage they picked up that made them retire from the race. But yeah, I would agree with you that it was Grosjean's one of his finest pieces that we've seen from him on track this year, I'd say.
Yeah.
Somebody following that up saying the Lambo looked great at Indy, and Porsche is having a great season in GTD Pro and LMGT3.
True.
Yeah, definitely not wrong on that second point there. Maybe if you're FAF Motorsports, that'd be a switch that you might be regretting from
Ouch,
this
you
past
really have to
off-season, but
you really have to kick me when I'm down, eh?
well, I just noticed that you're wearing FAF merch, so that's on me for not noticing earlier, I guess. But yeah, it's been a great season for Porsche though in both championships, and one that's definitely been an improvement on last year where they had that debut of that new Evo spec 911 GT3 car. Another rough race for the Acuras as well, and I believe somebody in there, somebody followed that up saying, I know Acura can't wait to rub their hands dry of Wayne Taylor Racing. It's another harsh thing to say.
A little bit harsh. They've had a couple wins this year, guys. Like,
well, they're gonna say they had some awful strategy calls and poor pit stops, among other things, this season. I'll just leave it at this. I've said before, I think the switch between Cadillac and Acura is good for all parties. I think that Wayne Taylor Racing is going to do a lot better with that Cadillac program than they have done with Acura the past few years, and I also think as well that Meyer-Shank Racing, with the hands of that Acura program, is going to have some more success as well than Wayne Taylor Racing has managed out of it. So I'll be a little bit nicer and say that, but yeah, you can definitely say they've struggled quite a bit this season as well.
Can't wait to rub their hands dry. Man, that's harsh.
Yeah. Wayne Taylor Racing took the gamble every chance they got, is the latest reply we got. I would say that, I've said this like 10 times now, but consistency is the championship winner in IMSA, so they just have lacked that consistency again this year, and I think that's why going into Petit Le Mans, we don't even have them in the championship picture, which, when's the last time Wayne Taylor Racing hasn't been in the picture going into Petit Le Mans? I think it's been quite a while.
Yeah, you're right. But they've been in it quite a while. I feel like last year we criticized them because they didn't come through in the big moments and pick up those big wins. And then this year they came out and they got the wins, but they didn't have the consistency to follow it up. It's it's been a tough season for them. Yeah.
Last year I criticized them because, and not that they're doing this intentionally, but I always felt like they were going into Petit Le Mans needing too many things to go their way.
Yeah.
And multiple years in a row, those things did not go their way. So what I said for them this year is they needed to get out strong and then maintain that pace over the course of the season, which is really something that only Porsche has done in the GTP class this year. And we're seeing the result of that in the championship right now.
Yep, you're right.
Okay, quick news bit to touch on here, although a very big news story, and then we'll wrap things up this episode because my voice is deteriorating as this episode goes on, and give it another half hour and I don't think I'd be able to say anything. Genesis, which is of course a subsidiary of Hyundai, announced a couple of weeks ago, is the weekend or the week leading up to the 6 Hours of Fuji, that they would be creating and entering an LMDH car, and that's about all they said. They didn't say what championships they would be entering the car in. They didn't say when they would be entering the car. They didn't say they didn't confirm which chassis manufacturer they would be going with. Heavily rumored to be Orica, by the way. But we can use our fairest judgment here and assume that this program will be on track in 2026. And I would say, judging by the reaction to this news, that we would expect cars in both IMSA and the WEC in 2026, with the rumor going around that Ganassi would be running a program in IMSA. I know that rumor's been picking up additional traction in recent weeks as well. So I don't know if I have a ton of things to say about this story right now. I'm going to say the usual suspects. It's another picture to the GTP/hypercar puzzle, and another manufacturer to add to perhaps the already oversubscribed grids that we have in both championships, but one that I'm definitely not going to complain about right now.
Yeah, it's this is one of those manufacturers that we have been kicking around the idea of getting to run a GTP or LMDH, LMH program, but just never really jumped in on it. I wonder if this is sort of a direct reaction to the extension that was announced earlier in the season. I believe it was in the lead up to the 24 Hours of Le Mans that it was confirmed that we're going to get a few more years for sure of this current LMDH LMH rule set. So if that is if it is a direct response, then good job on the sanctioning bodies for getting that confirmed nice and early. But I'm excited to see Hyundai join the grid here, even if whether it's under whatever name that it's under. It's going to be under Genesis, which is kind of their luxury car brand, but still good to see. And Mr. Waffles mentioned it in the chat. The immediate hope, going hand in hand with an announcement this past weekend of a new Bosch hand control system that is apparently compatible with an LMDH car, is hope to see Robert Wickens get an opportunity at one of these LMDH drives, whether it be in the World Endurance Championship or stateside and IMSA. It would be great to see him get that opportunity, and he's definitely trying hard to build up to that potential opportunity. So whether or not that happens, there's a lot of things between now and 2026 when that car would be sort of expected to debut. But just more exciting news. Another manufacturer getting joining the fun of IMSA and the WEC.
Yeah, and a manufacturer that also is already heavily involved in IMSA right now.
Yeah.
Go to basically any IMSA race in the season, as long as they have a pilot challenge racing, I suppose. And you're going to go into the fan village and see a giant Hyundai setup with their road cars on display. Sometimes they have some simulators out for people to use, the usual prizes to give away. This is a manufacturer that is already heavily invested in IMSA. And We've only seen them in the Pilot Challenge in the TCR category, but their presence there is already felt pretty heavily in the paddock. So, I'm very excited to see. Again, not officially confirmed that they're going to be racing in IMSA, but we can heavily expect that. Really excited to see their introduction into the top flight of IMSA racing as we have it right now, which is, of course, that GTP prototype racing. And I think they're going to bring a lot of fans into the fold as well. This is a manufacturer that has a lot of interest in their road car division right now, especially with that Hyundai N division. So very excited to see what they bring to the table in 2026 expected, and looking forward to it.
I think, do we have, we got some people in the chat that are excited about it as well.
Yeah,
2026 WEC might have 40 full-time cars. Yeah, it might come. Yeah.
2025 WEC might have 40 full-time cars.
Yeah.
Mr. Waffles brings up a good question here. We have 2 Genesis, 2 Astons, 1 more Cadillac, and 1 more Lamborghini coming to the WEC in the future. My question is, are there enough platinum drivers to go around? Well, that's a good question. One I wasn't prepared for. I definitely don't have the million dot board out of what drivers might be available and when, but it's definitely going to be a very interesting piece to the silly season puzzle come to the end of next season. The driver lineups don't need to be fully platinum. In fact, Alpine has a driver lineup in the WEC in the 35 car that is an all gold driver lineup, so you don't need to have a full platinum lineup. But I do see the sentiment there of we have a lot of top tier prototype drivers already affiliated with a manufacturer right now. Some of them aligned with the manufacturer very early on after realizing that was going to be their best chance to race in prototype racing. So we'll see. There's going to be a lot of interesting things going into the end of next year. So a year from now, we'll follow up with that question and see what we got.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the list right now, and it is it's the platinum driver list is pretty long and still contains the likes of Jacques Villeneuve. So there's plenty of oh my goodness, is that Pastor Maldonado is still a platinum rated driver as well? So
wow.
Maybe we get the old washed up F1 fellas coming out to fill some seats, but
it's not washed up, it's a feeder series.
Yeah, true, feeder series. You're right. But there's plenty of platinum drivers to go around. Also, you remember, there's a lot of platinum drivers that also compete in the GT ranks. And we have seen lots of platinum drivers in this now LMDH, LMH era transition from the GT ranks to the prototype ranks successfully. So, we could see some more growth from some of those drivers, and then it opens up more opportunities for there's a ton of very strong gold drivers out there that could. There's plenty of drivers to go around right now. I think I'm not overly concerned about 5 or 6 more cars and that drying up the driver market. But it is a good discussion to have. Because you're right. There's only so many sort of factory drivers to go around. Oh, Juan Pablo Montoya is still a platinum driver too.
Well, there you go.
There we go.
He's raced.
Completes the 3 driver squad for Le Mans.
Yeah, still vying for the Triple Crown, I suppose. I mean, you could make the argument that he won LMP2 Pro-Am if you want to dig deep, but who knows? How can I track viewership numbers for the WEC races? I don't think they publicly put those numbers out the same way that you might see for American market races where they'll put the TV ratings out. So I don't know if I have a great answer for you on that. What I will say is the on-track attendance usually for the past season or two in both IMSA and the WEC, we've been seeing record attendances at the track in both championships. So that's a good indication that viewership is at least on the rise in both championships, although I can't give you a specific number beyond, or a specific metric beyond that, in terms of actual digital viewing.
I have one more surprise driver on this platinum list before we wrap this up and really go off the rails.
Is Jeff Gordon still a platinum?
Oh, I can check, but this one is even. No, Jeff Gordon is not he's not a platinum driver anymore. Scott Speed is still a platinum driver. That kind of boggles my mind.
Yeah, we can go on the list. I'm sure there's an even bigger surprise somewhere on that list. But
oh yeah, there definitely is. But
I made a joke about Jeff Gordon there. Actually, I meant to say when we were talking about Indy, 24 car wins at Indianapolis. I said I was going to talk about that on this episode. There you go. How fitting.
Jimmy Johnson is still platinum as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's still getting around, though. I mean, he's still racing in the Cup Series. He raced at Le Mans last year, for heaven's sake. You know.
You're right. You're right.
So
he did.
All right, I do think that's a good place to end this episode. We do have Petit Le Mans coming up in a couple of weeks. Unconfirmed right now if we'll have an episode before Petit Le Mans or not. I will say right now that both of us, pending all things go well, will be in attendance at Petit Le Mans. I just booked my flights for that yesterday. So, very excited personally to be making it out to the season finale IMSA race for the 4th year in a row. Crazy to say. Which is something that I wasn't really expecting, but some plans changed for the good this time, and are going to make it out there. And I do have some fun things planned for Petit Le Mans as well, which I'll say right now. So stick around to the channel if you want to see some of those. But for us, we will let you know if we have an episode planned before then. But if not, week after, hopefully my voice is a lot better and I'm not coughing. And we get
I'm not living in 4 FPS.
Yeah, and we get a proper full episode in, and then things start to wind down. We got one more WEC race at Bahrain in November. Then we're back into another off season. So I'm gonna leave it at that for today. I think I did a pretty decent job at muting all of my coughs. Although if you were watching on video, you would have seen all of them. And Stu, I want to thank you for carrying me throughout a lot of this episode. Your talking did me some wonders in this show.
I picked up on that, so I was running with it in my laggy video and all.
Yep. And thank you very much for tuning in, whether you tuned in live or tuned in on a podcasting platform. Hope to catch you soon for another episode, and take care.